From here on out, it's all easy street. Welcome back to the Scale Builders Guild. Thanks again for watching. It's Road to the Scale Nationals, episode 5. That means we're 10 weeks into this process of getting these trucks ready for the Scale Nationals in Leesburg, Alabama, April 8th, 2022. If you're not familiar with the Scale Nationals or how the Road to the Scale Nationals works, it's basically where Josh from Harley Designs and myself are taking trucks to compete in classes 1, 2, and 3 at the Scale Nationals, which is a Sorrca rules comp in Leesburg, Alabama. It's going to be a very exciting trip. I'm very excited, as I'm sure most of you are, to see some real progress on these Jeeps. Yes, I'm making Jeeps. 2 of them that will compete in 3 classes. The one that you see right here, this is the Class 2/3 Jeep, and this one back here is the Class 1 Jeep. Lots of differences between the 2 of them. Completely different chassis, completely different body styles, completely different tire sizes. Lots of differences. Lots of updates though for this week. A lot has been accomplished in the last 2 weeks. And from first glance, it doesn't really look like much has happened. But I assure you, there were many, many hours spent just staring and thinking. But there has been some pretty substantial progress. And seeing that we're like only 30 plus days away from this event, I should probably get my butt in gear. Without further ado, let's go into Class 1 and see what we did there first. Get this guy out of the way. Okay, so here's Class 1. Here's where it's sitting. Again, not a lot of cosmetic differences from what you saw 2 weeks ago, but upon closer inspection, you will notice some massive differences and some huge progress has been made. First of all, we've got 4 tires that match. You're welcome. I think that's where we could end this video and everyone would be happy. Most notably, sliders have now been added. These are hard, rigid mounted to the chassis sliders or skid plates, whatever you want to call those. Those are mounted directly to it. Drilled and tapped some of my tube from Scale Metal Supplies, threaded some grub screws through them, and screwed them directly into the skids. And now we've got a nice rigid mounting point and some metal sliders for extra bonus scale points. But probably the most interesting thing that we can talk about this week is that the front of the cab has been smoothed. It's been sanded and smoothed and ready for priming and filling of gaps and such. It's probably not looking much different to you on camera, but what we're going to do is we're going to cut in here and get a nice close-up and a comparison between the 2 cabs because one has been finished and one hasn't. And I decided to try a new technique, at least new to me, and I'm certain that this is probably new to most of you who are finishing 3D printed bodies, but I went for a resin smoothing technique. And essentially what that means is you do a light sand over the whole body to get rid of some of the more aggressive print lines. And on my Prusa at 0.20, there's not a ton of that, to be fair. But I did have to sand it back a little bit, probably an hour's worth of sanding. And then I applied a thin coat of resin. Let me get that resin. This is Nova 3D washable resin. And this is designed for your resin printing printers. This washable resin liquid is designed for resin printing, and that's what I've been using it for and making a lot of detail parts with this sort of washable resin. But you can use that same material to smooth out your resin prints, and it works very much the same way as it would be used for printing. What I did was used a simple disposable brush like the one you see here and applied a thin coat against the entire body. I did panel at a time, and I just let it settle a bit so it kind of got into all the grooves, and I went against the grain of the print just so it actually had something to kind of stick into. And then I grabbed a UV lamp, just a simple UV lamp, just like this one here. I applied that over the areas where I had applied the resin, and it basically cures smooth and flat. It's pretty amazing, actually. I did experiment a little bit with cornstarch added into the resin to give it a bit of a thickening agent. And, you know, there is a chemical heat that is released when you apply UV light to resin, and that actually helped kind of cook it a bit, if you will. And the cornstarch seemed to help, and it actually did give it a much smoother surface to work off of. Once I had cured the resin, I did a quick wipe with alcohol, 99% alcohol, to completely remove any debris or any of the leftover resin from that resin curing process. And then basically gave it a quick wet sand with 1000 grit. And this is where we sit. A very nice smooth body, much smoother than you would ever get out of the 3D printer on its own. Pretty unique and interesting process, and I actually learned it from another video, which I will link right up here. You can go check that out at your leisure. I assure you this is going to be a great way of finishing FDM printed bodies. It's going to save you a ton of time in sanding as well. I'm sure that once I prime it, I will discover some low areas, and I'll probably need to do some spot filling in order to make sure it's completely smooth. But for the purposes of getting these done quickly and efficiently, I think this is a pretty great process, and I'm really, really happy with how it turned out. It's a vast improvement over where it was sitting before it got this coating. And I'm pretty thrilled. You can actually see probably in this right here, you can see the difference between the sanded portion and the finished portion. It's pretty smooth. Much smoother than the non-cured section. And I'm pretty happy with that because it's really going to cut down on the prep required to get these bodies ready for paint. Speaking of paint, I have chosen a color from the Porsche line of colors. So you're going to have to guess. Put your comment down below. Let me know what color you think I've chosen from the Porsche line of paints that are available for this model year. Yes, I'm putting Porsche paint on a Jeep. Put your comment down below. Let me know what color you think I've chosen. I love reading through the comments, and I try to answer as many of them as I can. And if I'm not answering them, my wife is. And if you're enjoying this video, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so you get updates anytime there's a new video from the Scale Builders Guild. Finally, on Class 1, the last thing that I've done is actually mounted the body to the chassis. Everything is firmly mounted now. What I did was I made some tiny little body mounts here at the back for the bed. Just screws into the back of the bed, and I'll cover those up with some sort of scale accessory so you don't even know that they're there. And in the front, same sort of deal. There was an existing mount point in the grill, which you can sort of see there. And all I've done there is drilled into the skid that holds the steering servo and the winch servo, and a couple of grub screws and some lock nuts, and you're good to go. Fully connected to the chassis. Nice rigid mount. Pretty happy with how that's turned out so far. Okay, so that's Class 1. Lots of progress. All right, and as you can see, Class 2, I think the major thing that we can say we accomplished was the cage work. I'm really, really, really happy with how this has turned out. It's not entirely done, but it's mostly done. What I'm waiting on now is media blasting and etching primer and some sort of coating, whether I'm going to powder coat it, Cerakote it, or just paint it, depending on time. That's where that's at. And I'm really pleased. I think it looks really good. It's fast looking. I don't know if fast is the right word, but it certainly works for the rest of the lines of the Jeep, I think anyway. And kind of has that look of like an Ultra 4 or, you know, some sort of purpose-built truck. And I'm pleased with that. It's not exactly what I had in my mind's eye, and it's not exactly straight, but it's pretty good for limited tools, limited time, limited budget. Scale Metal Supplies supplied all the metal for this scale truck, and I could not be happier with their service and their products. I actually have another order on the way to finish up all the bumpers. I need the bumper tabs, and they're not here yet, but they should be here very soon, at least for the next update they will be. They're great. I'm really pleased with this. I think it looks pretty good. There will not be a spare. I don't think I need a spare for the extra scale points. I think I get enough points from this and the rest of the truck to cover off the max scale points for this class. Still a couple of pieces in progress here. The drop bed with the fuel cell, that's still a work in progress. So that's still in the dull gray. Same thing with the rear mount for that whole thing. We've got a couple of ideas in mind there. We're going to be changing a few things up. Turning the truck to the top, I have mounted the JEC roof rack. Yes, this is a Sorrca legal roof rack, believe it or not. Even with this pulley wheel on here, which is for winching, so you can do dramatic maneuvers like this one, if that's something you need to do, which I might have to. That's sort of the deal with that. But that'll be hard mounted. It's just placed there for now. It'll all be attached properly and firmly once this build is complete. Nothing has changed mechanically on this truck, but one other little tiny design thing that I did was I didn't find a way to mount the whole front cab to the chassis. And that was something that was kind of stumping me a little bit, but I came up with this cool little clip system. Super easy to get at things if you need to, super easy to replace, and quite a rigid mount point. I'm kind of chuffed at myself for coming up with that design. I've also printed that in Prusa Galaxy Black, and that is one fine looking print, I gotta say. Nice that it kind of blends into the rest of the chassis and you don't even really see it. And won't interfere with the bumper mount either. So that's going to be pretty great. What else? Oh, slider design. I also started working on this. I also started working on a slider design, and this is just a temporary piece that I cut from some ductwork that I had removed from this room. And the idea here is just to sort of match the contour of the door there. I'll probably extend it down a little bit and use a small bending brake that I have to put a bend in it so it actually contours to the chassis sliders or the chassis skid. And I'll firmly mount it with some scale screws and call it a day. Those are Sorrca legal. That's a slider. So there you go. It doesn't matter how thick it is, just how wide it is. And we're well within our width requirements. I originally thought about send, cut, send, but I don't know if I'll have time to get those accomplished that way. So I'll have to do some cutting of metal myself, and then I'll send it back to myself too. One final thing for Class 2/3, I was considering running a fender, and they for this J6 body they actually have a couple of additional fender style. There's this nice narrow one here, which I thought was a pretty good choice. It won't interfere with the steering of the tires and should stay out of the way, but still add a little tiny bit of a protection there. I don't need it to meet any specs for Class 2 or 3. I just kind of visually thought that was kind of a nice piece. I don't know. Put a comment down below. Let me know if you think I should run those fenders or do without. There are many things left to accomplish. Many things. But the list gets shorter every 2 weeks. So that's good. What do we need to do still? Inner fenders. Definitely need those. Because I need those scale points. Interior. Interior for both trucks is coming along. I decided rather than deal with the resin seats and the nonsense of those not really printing well, I just print them FDM, do a super low infill rate, and they actually turned out to be lighter than the resin ones. So again, FDM printing to the rescue. Very happy with the progress on this. Obviously there's going to be 2 of them, one for Class 2/3, one for Class 1, but it's going to be exactly the same interior. Completely legal to Sorrca to give you all the interior points you need. Knees up driver, can't go full flat, there's just no room for it. And not super heavy, so not affecting center of gravity a lot, still affecting it a little. But I can't not do an interior. Who do you think I am? What channel is this if I'm not doing an interior, honestly? But that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. It's basic, but it's still going to be there. And when you look into the truck, you won't see electronics, and that's the most important thing. Finally, speaking of printing, I've been using the resin printer over time and printing a ton of the detail pieces. There's all kinds of things in there. We've got grill louvers, actual mesh pieces. We've got tiny little J's. We've got hinges. All kinds of detail pieces that are going to find their way onto the truck once the major body finishing and painting has been accomplished. But it's great to have that resin printer. It's been a huge help, honestly. And I would never be able to get the same level of detail out of an FDM printer for those parts. So for those pieces alone, super thrilled to have that Elegoo Mars 3. Okay, I think that's covered it. Everything that I've accomplished in the last 2 weeks. These trucks are really starting to come together, and I'm really pleased with the progress. While we only have a month left, I definitely think I'm on the home stretch. Lots of little fiddly bits to go still, but honestly, I'm pretty thrilled with the progress. What do you think? Do you think these are coming along? Do you think I'm actually going to be able to drive them properly? Will I even have any time to test? Probably not. Do check out Harley Designs Inc. He's got a lot of stuff going on with his trucks. Amazing stuff, I might add. And you will definitely learn something from everything that he's been doing. So I'll put a link down below. You can check those out. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again in 2 weeks.